Captain Olivia Miller stood on the bridge of the USS Defiant, her eyes fixed on the main screen. The vast emptiness of space was no longer empty. Dozens of alien ships approached Earth's orbital defense network, their metallic hulls gleaming under the distant sun. Her heart beat faster, but her face remained calm. She had trained for this moment her entire career, though she had never truly believed it would come. "Status report," she said, her voice steady despite the tension in the air. "Lieutenant William," Carter responded from his station. "All systems operational, Captain. Defensive grid at full power. The rest of the fleet is in position." Miller nodded. 3 years ago, humanity had detected the first signals from the Keltraxian Empire, a massive interstellar civilization that spanned hundreds of star systems. At first, Earth had celebrated. They were not alone in the universe. The possibility of friendship, of learning from an advanced species, had filled everyone with hope. That hope had died quickly. The Keltraxians did not seek friendship. They sought resources, new worlds to fuel their endless expansion across the galaxy. Earth was just another planet to them, and humans were just another primitive species to be conquered or destroyed. "Incoming transmission from the Keltraxian flagship," said Communications Officer Lisa Brown. "It's Ambassador Zix Thelen again." Miller took a deep breath. "Put him through." The screen changed to show the alien ambassador. Lord Zix Thelen resembled a tall, thin human with pale blue skin and large, entirely black eyes. He wore an elaborate uniform covered in what Miller assumed were military decorations. His thin lips curled into what might have been a smile on a human face but looked more like a sneer on his. "Captain Miller," he said, his voice translated by the ship's computer. "Your deadline approaches. Has your planet reached a decision, or must we demonstrate our power further?" Last week, the Keltraxians had destroyed one of Earth's outer colonies on Mars as a show of force. 2,000 people had died in seconds. "Our position remains unchanged, Ambassador," Miller replied. "Earth will not surrender to the Empire. We are a sovereign world." The alien's expression didn't change, but his voice took on a mocking tone. "Sovereign? You have barely left your own solar system. Your technology is centuries behind ours. What do you possibly think you can do against the might of the Keltraxian armada?" Miller stood taller. "We will defend ourselves." For the first time, the ambassador laughed, a harsh sound that made several bridge officers flinch. "With what? Your primitive vessels? Your quaint nuclear weapons? The Empire has been conquering stars since your ancestors were crafting stone tools." Before Miller could respond, her personal communication device buzzed. She glanced down to see an urgent message from Admiral Frank Weaver, the head of Earth's Defense Forces. "Operation Thunderbolt authorized. Final diplomatic attempt, then proceed." Miller looked back at the screen, where the ambassador waited with smug confidence. "The people of Earth value their freedom above all else, Ambassador. We ask you one final time to withdraw your forces and recognize our sovereignty." "Or what?" Zix Thelen sneered. "Or you will face the consequences." The ambassador laughed again. "Your bravery is admirable but misplaced. You have 1 hour to surrender, or we will reduce your major cities to ash." The transmission cut off. For a moment, silence filled the bridge. Then Miller turned to her crew. "Send emergency code Thunderbolt to Lunar Command. Then prepare all defensive systems." "Captain," Carter said hesitantly, "even with all Earth ships combined, we can't stop their fleet. Their technology is too advanced." Miller's lips curved into a slight smile. "Who said anything about using our ships, Lieutenant?" Deep beneath the surface of the moon, in a facility unknown to most of humanity, Admiral Weaver received the Thunderbolt code. He stood in a vast control center surrounded by dozens of technicians and military personnel. For 5 years, they had worked in secret, preparing for this moment. "The Keltraxians have refused our final offer," he announced to the room. "Initiate Operation Thunderbolt." Susan Martinez, the lead engineer of the project, nodded and began entering commands into her console. "Powering up reactor core. All systems. Coming online." Weaver walked to a communication station. "Get me Captain John Rivera. A moment later, a man's face appeared on the screen. He wore the same uniform as Miller, but with different insignia. Behind him was not the familiar bridge of an Earth Defense Force vessel, but something entirely new. Captain Rivera reporting. "Admiral?" "John, it's time," Weaver said simply. Rivera nodded, his expression serious but determined. "We're ready, sir. The crew has been on standby since the Mars attack. Remember your orders. Demonstrate our capabilities but avoid unnecessary destruction if possible. We want to deter them, not start an interstellar war we can't finish." "Understood, sir. What about Captain Miller and the Defiant?" "She'll hold position. The Keltraxians are focused on her. They won't be expecting you." Rivera saluted. "For Earth, sir." "For Earth," Weaver replied, ending the transmission. He turned to Martinez. "Is it ready?" The engineer looked up from her console, her eyes showing both pride and concern. "As ready as it will ever be. We've run every test possible without actually deploying it. The theoretical models are solid, but we're about to find out. If theory matches reality." Weaver finished for her. "How long until launch?" 15 minutes to complete the startup sequence. The bay doors will take another 5 minutes to open fully." Weaver nodded. "Then we have 20 minutes to pray this works." Back on the Defiant, Miller received confirmation that Operation Thunderbolt was underway. Now she needed to keep the Keltraxians focused on her ship until the real surprise was ready. "Open a channel to the ambassador," she ordered. Zix Thelen appeared on screen again, looking impatient. "Have you come to your senses, Captain?" "I wanted to ask if you know much about human history," Miller said calmly. The ambassador blinked, clearly not expecting this question. "What?" "Human history. You said we're primitive, so I wonder how much research you've actually done on us." "This is irrelevant. Your time is running out," Miller continued as if he hadn't spoken. "Throughout our history, humans have often been underestimated. Smaller nations have defeated larger empires. Weaker armies have overcome stronger ones. Do you know why?" The ambassador's expression showed growing irritation. "I don't care about your primitive conflicts." "Innovation," Miller said. "Humans are remarkably good at creating solutions to impossible problems. When faced with a superior force, we don't give up. We adapt, we create, we surprise." For the first time, a flicker of uncertainty crossed the alien's face. "What are you implying, Captain?" Miller glanced at her display. 15 minutes had passed. "Simply that you might not know us as well as you think you do." "Is this an attempt to delay the inevitable? Your time is—" An alarm suddenly blared. On the Keltraxian ship. The ambassador turned away from the screen, shouting questions to someone off camera. When he looked back, his black eyes were wide. "What is that?" he demanded. "What have you done?" Miller allowed herself a small smile. "I believe that's what we call a surprise, Ambassador. You should watch your sensors carefully. You're about to witness something unique in the galaxy." As the lunar bay doors slowly opened, revealing the secret humanity had kept hidden for 5 years, Miller knew the real battle was about to begin. 5 years earlier, Susan Martinez wiped sweat from her forehead as she stared at the computer screen in front of her. The underground lunar facility hummed with activity around her. Scientists and engineers rushed back and forth, carrying equipment and checking readings. This was the most important day of her career, perhaps the most important day for all of humanity. "Core temperature stabilizing," she announced, her voice echoing in the large chamber. "Power output at 95% and holding steady." Beside her, physicist Alan Howard nodded with satisfaction. "The containment field is working perfectly." "We've done it, Susan." Martinez wasn't ready to celebrate yet. They had been working on Project Leviathan for 3 years now, ever since scientists detected the first signs of the Keltraxian Empire at the edge of the solar system. Earth's governments had united in secret, pooling resources and the brightest minds to prepare a defense that might give humanity a fighting chance. "Run the final diagnostic check," she ordered a nearby technician. "I want to be absolutely certain before we inform Admiral Weaver." The massive chamber they stood in was carved, deep beneath the lunar surface, hidden from prying eyes and scanning technology. In the center of the room, Separated by thick barriers, stood the experimental reactor core that would power the most ambitious project in human history. Howard walked to a large window overlooking an even larger space beyond. Martinez joined him, gazing at the fruit of their labor. Below them, in a construction bay the size of a small city, sat the USS Leviathan. The ship was unlike anything humans had built before. Nearly twice the size of the largest spacecraft ever constructed, its midnight black hull seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. It had taken thousands of workers, billions in resources, and technology recovered from an alien crash site in Nevada decades ago to create it. "Do you think it will be enough?" Howard asked quietly. Martinez didn't answer immediately. The question had haunted all of them. "It has to be." The door behind them slid open, and Admiral Frank Weaver walked in, accompanied by AI specialist Grace Kelly and weapons designer Peter Johnson. The Admiral's face showed the strain of the past years, but his eyes lit up when he saw the reactor readings. "Is it stable?" he asked without preamble. Martinez nodded. "Yes, sir. Project Leviathan is officially operational." A rare smile crossed Weaver's face. "Show me." The group took an elevator down to the construction bay. As they walked across the floor toward the massive ship, Martinez explained the final modifications they had made. "The hull contains the nanomaterials we developed based on the recovered alien technology. It can absorb most energy weapons and redistribute the force. The propulsion system uses principles that the Keltraxians wouldn't understand because they developed along different technological lines than we did." Johnson pointed to several areas along the ship's exterior. "And these are the weapon systems I designed. They don't rely on conventional physics as the Keltraxians understand it. Their shields will be useless." Admiral Weaver looked up at the enormous vessel. "And they won't see it coming?" Kelly nodded confidently. "The cloaking system is unlike anything in known space. It doesn't just bend light around the ship like traditional stealth technology. It exists partly in another dimension, making it completely invisible to standard detection methods until it fully materializes, which will happen right in the middle of their fleet," Johnson added with grim satisfaction. They stopped at the main entrance to the ship. A team of crew members was training inside, preparing for a mission they hoped would never come. "The Keltraxians believe we're centuries behind them technologically," Weaver said, his voice low. "Let's hope they never realize what we've actually accomplished." Howard nodded grimly. "They won't know what hit them." Weaver turned to face the team. "You've all done the impossible here. Earth owes you a debt it can never repay." "We're not safe yet," Martinez reminded him. "The ship works in theory and in our tests, but we've never engaged an actual Keltraxian vessel." "And hopefully we never will," Weaver replied. "The Leviathan is our deterrent, our way of showing the galaxy that humanity isn't as helpless as they might think. If all goes well, the mere existence of this ship will be enough to maintain peace." But all did not go well. Now, 5 years later, as the lunar bay doors slowly ground open, Martinez stood in the control room watching the monitors with a mixture of pride and terror. Beside her, Admiral Weaver gave the final authorization. "Captain Rivera, you are cleared for launch. Operation Thunderbolt is a go." On the bridge of the Leviathan, Captain John Rivera sat in the command chair, his crew at their stations around him. They had trained for this moment for years, running countless simulations, but nothing could prepare them for the reality of what they were about to do. "All hands, battle stations," he ordered. "Reactor at full power. Prepare for dimensional shift." His weapons officer, Nicole Washington, looked up from her console. "Weapon systems online and ready, Captain. Navigation set for coordinates just outside Earth's defense grid," reported Sam Foster from the helm. "We'll emerge directly between the Defiant and the Keltraxian fleet." Rivera took a deep breath. "Communications, patch me through to Admiral Weaver." The Admiral's face appeared on the screen. "Captain, you understand your mission?" "Yes, sir. Demonstrate our capabilities. Force a withdrawal if possible and avoid unnecessary destruction." Weaver nodded. "The future of Earth depends on what happens in the next hour, Captain. Show them what humanity is capable of, but remember, We want to deter, not destroy. If this turns into a full-scale war, we'll lose regardless of what the Leviathan can do. Understood, sir. Rivera turned to his crew. Prepare for launch. The massive ship hummed to life, its experimental engines generating power that seemed impossible for its size. Slowly, the Leviathan rose from its berth, hovering in the lunar bay for a moment before accelerating toward the open doors. As it cleared the moon, the ship's cloaking system engaged. To any observer, it would seem to vanish entirely from existence, but it was still there, moving rapidly toward the standoff between Earth's defense fleet and the Keltraxian armada. In the control room, Martinez watched the tracking system that showed the Leviathan's position. Dimensional shift successful, they can't see us. Weaver nodded tensely. Now we wait. Aboard the Defiant, Captain Miller continued her conversation with the increasingly agitated Ambassador Zix Thelen. His crew was clearly confused by whatever their sensors were detecting from the lunar surface. What trickery is this? The ambassador demanded. Our sensors detect a massive energy signature from your moon, but nothing is there. Miller kept her expression neutral. As I was saying, Ambassador, humans have a talent for surprising those who underestimate us. On the Leviathan, Rivera gave the order they had all been waiting for. Disengage cloaking system, let's introduce ourselves to the Keltraxian Empire. In the space between Earth's defense fleet and the alien armada, the fabric of reality seemed to ripple. Then, like a massive predator emerging from the depths, the Leviathan appeared. Its black hull absorbed the starlight around it, making it look like a ship-shaped hole in space itself. On the Keltraxian flagship, alarms blared as their sensors finally detected the enormous vessel that had appeared from nowhere. Impossible, whispered the Keltraxian tactical officer loud enough for Ambassador Zix Thelen to hear. Our scans indicate technology far beyond registered human capabilities. The ambassador stared at the screen in disbelief. Is that really a human warship? Captain Rivera's voice came through on all channels, broadcasting to both fleets. This is Captain John Rivera of the United Earth Defense Force vessel Leviathan. You have threatened our homeworld. Withdraw immediately or face the consequences. The real battle was about to begin. Silence filled the communication channels for several long seconds after Captain Rivera's ultimatum. On the bridge of the Leviathan, the crew waited tensely for the Keltraxian response. The massive black ship hung in space between Earth's smaller defense fleet and the alien armada, its very presence a declaration that humanity was not as helpless as the Empire had believed. Rivera studied the tactical display showing the positions of the Keltraxian vessels. Their formation had faltered when the Leviathan appeared, ships adjusting position as if unsure how to respond to this unexpected development. Any response from the Keltraxians, Lieutenant Rogers? Rivera asked his communications officer. Nothing. Yet, Captain. Ben Rogers replied, his fingers moving across his console. But their ships are changing formation. They appear to be surrounding us. Nicole Washington looked up from the weapons station. They're targeting us, Captain. All ships. Rivera nodded calmly. As expected. Shield status? Energy absorption systems at full capacity, reported Chief Engineer Paul Wilson from his station. The nanomaterial hull is responding perfectly. We're ready for whatever they throw at us. On the bridge of the Defiant, Captain Miller watched as the Keltraxian ships regrouped around the Leviathan. The aliens clearly considered the mysterious new vessel the primary threat, which was exactly the plan. She turned to her tactical officer. Lieutenant Carter, keep our weapons powered down. We don't want to provoke them further. Yes, Captain, Carter replied, though he looked concerned. But what about the Leviathan? They're completely surrounded. Miller allowed herself a small smile. I think they can handle it. The view screen flickered and Ambassador Zix Thelen appeared again. His earlier smugness was gone, replaced by barely controlled anger and confusion. What is the meaning of this deception? He demanded. You claim to be a primitive species, yet you possess technology that should be beyond your capabilities. We never claimed to be primitive, Ambassador, Miller replied evenly. That was your assumption. We simply chose not to correct it. The ambassador's black eyes narrowed. This changes nothing. One ship, no matter how advanced, cannot stand against the might of the Keltraxian armada. Our Emperor has ordered your subjugation, and it will be carried out. Miller's expression hardened. I recommend you reconsider, Ambassador. That ship represents technology you've never encountered before. Captain Rivera was not bluffing when he suggested you withdraw. Enough, Zix Thelen snapped. You have made your choice. The transmission cut off abruptly. They're powering weapons, Carter reported urgently. All ships. Miller opened a channel to the Leviathan. Captain Rivera, be advised the Keltraxians are preparing to attack. We see it, Captain Miller, Rivera replied calmly. Stand by. In the Lunar Command Center, Admiral Weaver and Susan Martinez watched the tactical display with growing tension. The Keltraxian ships had formed a sphere around the Leviathan, weapons charged and ready to fire. They're going to hit it with everything they have, Martinez said quietly. Weaver nodded. Now we find out if your design works as well in practice, as it did in theory. Martinez didn't respond. After 5 years of work, countless simulations and endless testing, the moment of truth had arrived. If she had made even one miscalculation, the Leviathan and its crew would be destroyed, and Earth would be left defenseless. On the Keltraxian flagship, Lord Zixa Thelen gave the order. Fire all weapons. Destroy that ship. Energy beams lanced out from dozens of alien vessels simultaneously, all converging on the Leviathan. The space around the human ship lit up with blinding light as the concentrated firepower of the Keltraxian armada struck its target. On the Defiance bridge, the crew watched in tense silence. For a moment, the Leviathan was completely obscured by the energy barrage. My God, whispered Lieutenant Carter. Nothing could survive that. But as the light faded, the impossible became visible. The Leviathan still hung in space, completely intact. Its black hull seemed to shimmer slightly, absorbing the last of the energy weapon's power. On the Leviathan's bridge, Rivera gripped the arms of his command chair as the ship shuddered slightly around him. Damage report, he ordered. Paul Wilson looked up from his engineering station with a broad smile. No damage, Captain. The hull absorbed 98% of the energy. The remaining 2% was dispersed by our secondary shields. We're fully operational. A cheer went up from the crew, quickly silenced by Rivera's raised hand. We're not done yet. They'll try again with different weapons. Prepare for Phase 2. On the Keltraxian flagship, chaos erupted as officers reported the impossible readings to their commander. It absorbed our energy weapons. The tactical officer exclaimed. The human ship shows no damage whatsoever. Ambassador Zixa Thelen stared at the view screen in disbelief. Impossible. Try again with gravitic weapons. The Keltraxian ships adjusted their positions slightly, targeting systems locking onto the Leviathan once more. This time they fired weapons that distorted the fabric of space itself, creating crushing gravitational forces that should have torn any vessel apart at the molecular level. Again, the Leviathan weathered the assault without apparent damage. Our weapons are having no effect, reported the increasingly panicked tactical officer. This defies all known physics. Zix Thelen slammed his fist against his command console. All ships, close to direct engagement range. Prepare boarding parties. We will take that ship and its technology for the Empire. The alien vessels began moving closer to the Leviathan, preparing for physical contact and boarding actions. On the human ship's bridge, Washington reported the movement. They're closing in, Captain. Looks like they intend to board us. Rivera nodded. Just as we expected. Navigator Foster, prepare for Maneuver Sequence Alpha. Lieutenant Washington, target. They're propulsion systems only. We don't want to destroy them if we can avoid it. Targeting propulsion systems, Washington confirmed, her fingers dancing across her console. Ready on your command. Rivera opened a channel to all Earth forces. This is Captain Rivera. The Keltraxians are preparing boarding actions. We are initiating defensive countermeasures. All Earth vessels hold position. In the Lunar Command Center, Weaver turned to Martinez. Time to show them what else your ship can do. On the Leviathan, Rivera gave the order. Execute Maneuver Alpha. Weapons. Free. What happened next astonished even the human observers who knew what the ship was capable of. The Leviathan seemed to blur, moving with impossible speed and grace for a vessel its size. It accelerated between two Keltraxian ships so quickly that they had no time to react, then pivoted in a way that should have been physically impossible. As it moved, it fired precise beams of energy that struck the propulsion systems of the nearest alien vessels. Unlike conventional weapons, these beams passed through the Keltraxian shields as if they weren't there, disabling engines and leaving the ships drifting helplessly in space. On the Defiant, Miller and her crew watched in amazement as the Leviathan danced between the alien vessels, systematically disabling them one by one without destroying a single ship. How is it moving like that? Carter asked in wonder. The Leviathan's propulsion system operates on principles the Keltraxians don't understand, Miller explained, repeating what she had been told during her briefing on Operation Thunderbolt. It can execute maneuvers that their physics says are impossible. On the Keltraxian flagship, Ambassador Zixathelin watched in growing horror as his fleet was systematically rendered powerless. Ship after ship reported engine failures, weapon system shutdowns, and shield collapses. What kind of technology is this? He demanded of no one in particular. How could they have developed such capabilities in secret? The tactical officer had no answer. Nothing in the Keltraxian database suggested humans possessed technology even remotely close to what they were witnessing. As the Leviathan completed another impossible maneuver, disabling 3 more ships in the process, Zixathelin made a decision. He opened a channel to Captain Miller on the Defiant. Perhaps, he said, his voice carefully controlled, we should discuss terms. Captain Miller kept her face neutral as Ambassador Zixathelin spoke about terms. Inside, she felt a surge of hope. The plan was working. The Leviathan had done exactly what it was designed to do, create the illusion that humanity possessed, technology far beyond what the Keltraxians had anticipated. I'm listening, Ambassador, she said calmly. The blue-skinned alien's pride was clearly wounded, but he maintained a dignified posture. The Empire is willing to postpone your world's integration into our territory, pending further diplomatic discussions. Miller raised an eyebrow. Postpone? I think you misunderstand the situation. Your fleet has been effectively neutralized by a single Earth vessel. We are not interested in postponement. We require full recognition of Earth's sovereignty and independence. Zixathelin's black eyes narrowed. This is merely one battle, Captain. The Empire spans hundreds of star systems. We could return with 1,000 ships. And we could build 1,000 Leviathans, Miller countered, though she knew this was a bluff. The resources required to build just one had nearly bankrupted Earth's combined governments. But the ambassador didn't need to know that. Before the ambassador could respond, the tactical officer on the Defiant called out, Captain, 3 more Keltraxian vessels approaching from the outer system. Miller tensed. Reinforcements already? They hadn't anticipated this. On the view screen, Zixathelin's expression shifted to one of satisfaction. Ah, it seems some of our patrol ships have arrived. Perhaps now you will reconsider your position. In the Lunar Command Center, Admiral Weaver received the alert about the new Keltraxian ships. Where did they come from? He demanded. Susan Martinez studied the sensor readings. They appear to be smaller vessels, possibly scouts or patrols that were stationed elsewhere in the system. They're approaching rapidly. Weaver opened a channel to the Leviathan. Captain Rivera, we have 3 more Keltraxian ships incoming. Can you intercept? Already on it, Admiral, Rivera responded. The main fleet is largely disabled. We can handle 3 more. On the Leviathan's bridge, Rivera turned to his navigator. Sam, plot an intercept course for those new arrivals. Nicole, prepare weapon systems. Same protocols as before. Disable. Don't destroy. Course plotted. Foster confirmed. Intercept in 45 seconds. Washington nodded from the weapons station. Targeting systems ready, Captain. Rivera studied the tactical display. The 3 incoming Keltraxian vessels were smaller than the main battleships, but they were moving faster and with more agility. They would be harder to hit. All hands, prepare for high-speed engagement, he ordered. Paul, how's our energy reserve? Chief Engineer Wilson checked his readings. Still at 92%, Captain. The absorption systems converted most of the enemy fire into usable power. We could fight for days at this rate. Rivera nodded with satisfaction. Another benefit of Martinez's brilliant design. The more they fired at the Leviathan, the more power it had to fight back. The massive black ship accelerated toward the newcomers, its impossible speed once again defying conventional physics. The Keltraxian patrol ships immediately scattered, attempting to surround the Leviathan. They've seen what happened to the main fleet, Washington observed. They're being more cautious. Rivera smiled slightly. Good. That means they're afraid. Match their formation, Sam. Let's show them what this ship can really do. What followed was an incredible display of space combat that would later be studied in military academies across Earth. The Leviathan moved like a predator, anticipating the Keltraxian maneuvers before they happened. Where the alien ships zigged, the human vessel was already waiting. When they zagged, it cut them off with precision. One by one, the patrol ships found their propulsion systems disabled by the Leviathan's targeted weapons. Unlike the main fleet's vessels, these smaller ships had no backup systems. When their engines went offline, they were left completely adrift in space. On the Defiant, Miller watched the brief battle with satisfaction. "Ambassador," she said, turning back to the still-open channel with Zix Thelen, "I believe your reinforcements have been neutralized as well. Shall we continue our discussion of terms?" The ambassador's blue skin had paled considerably. "This is unprecedented," he said, his voice quieter now. "In 3,000 years of expansion, the Empire has never encountered a species with technology that could match our own, let alone exceed it. Perhaps it's time for the Empire to reconsider its approach to new civilizations," Miller suggested. "Cooperation might prove more beneficial than conquest." For a long moment, Zix Thelen was silent, apparently considering her words. Finally, he nodded slowly. "I will convey your suggestion to the Emperor. In the meantime, I am authorized to agree to a temporary cessation of hostilities." Miller shook her head. "Not good enough, Ambassador. We require formal recognition of Earth's independence and sovereignty, as well as a non-aggression pact. Nothing less will be acceptable." "The Empire does not sign non-aggression pacts with single-planet species," Zixathelen protested, though with less conviction than before. "The Empire has never encountered a single-planet species with a ship like the Leviathan before," Miller countered. "Times change, Ambassador. So must policies." In the Lunar Command Center, Weaver and Martinez watched the diplomatic exchange with growing hope. The gamble was paying off better than they had dared to dream. "Do you think they'll actually agree to our terms?" Martinez asked quietly. Weaver nodded. "They don't have much choice. From their perspective, we've neutralized their entire fleet without destroying a single ship. That kind of precision and power will terrify them. And fear is a powerful motivator in diplomacy." Back on the Leviathan, Rivera received word that the diplomatic discussions were progressing. He ordered his crew to maintain combat readiness but to hold position near the disabled Keltraxian patrol ships. "Well done, everyone," he told his crew. "The Leviathan performed even better than we hoped. The Keltraxians will think twice before threatening Earth again." Lieutenant Washington looked up from her station. "Captain, I'm detecting unusual energy readings from the Keltraxian flagship. They appear to be charging some kind of weapon we haven't seen before." Rivera frowned. "Put it on screen." The main view screen showed the Keltraxian flagship, still mostly operational despite the Leviathan's efforts to disable its propulsion. A section of its hull was opening to reveal what looked like an enormous cannon. "Analysis?" Rivera demanded. Wilson studied his readings. "It appears to be some kind of gravitational singularity weapon, Captain. Much more powerful than anything they've used so far. It's generating energy levels off the charts. Can our hull absorb that kind of attack?" The engineer hesitated. "Theoretically, yes. But we've never tested it against something this powerful." Rivera opened a channel to the Defiant. Captain Miller. Be advised the Keltraxian flagship is preparing to fire what appears to be their most powerful weapon. Ambassador Zixathelin may be negotiating in bad faith. On the Defiant, Miller's expression hardened as she received Rivera's message. She turned to the ambassador, who was still visible on her screen. Ambassador, our sensors indicate your flagship is preparing to fire on the Leviathan. Is this how the Empire conducts peace negotiations? Zixathelin's expression showed genuine surprise. I gave no such order. He turned away from the screen, apparently speaking to someone off camera. When he looked back, his face was tense. It seems our fleet commander has decided to take matters into his own hands. I cannot countermand his authority in combat situations. Then you should inform him that if that weapon fires, we will consider it an act of war, Miller said coldly. And we will respond accordingly. The ambassador's black eyes widened. Captain, you don't understand. That is our newest planetary siege weapon. It creates a temporary singularity that can tear apart a small moon. Your ship, advanced as it is, cannot possibly survive it. Miller's expression didn't change. We'll take our chances, Ambassador, and so will you. As the massive weapon on the Keltraxian flagship finished charging, all eyes turned to the Leviathan. The true test of humanity's secret weapon was about to begin. Time seemed to slow as the Keltraxian flagship's massive weapon reached full power. On the Leviathan, Captain Rivera made his decision in an instant. All power to the hull absorption systems, he ordered. Divert everything we can spare from other systems. Paul Wilson worked frantically at his engineering station. Captain, even with full power to the absorption systems, I can't guarantee we'll survive a direct hit from a weapon of that magnitude. Noted, Rivera said calmly. But we're not moving. If we dodge, that weapon could hit Earth or the Moon. We stand our ground. The crew of the Leviathan braced themselves as the Keltraxian weapon finished charging. A blinding light erupted from the alien flagship as it fired, sending a concentrated beam of energy directly toward the human vessel. The beam appeared to distort space itself around it, creating visible ripples in the fabric of reality. In the Lunar Command Center, Admiral Weaver and Susan Martinez watched in horror. That's no ordinary weapon, Martinez whispered. It's creating a localized singularity. If it hits the Leviathan directly, she didn't need to finish. They both knew what would happen. Despite all their planning and the advanced technology built into the ship, some things simply couldn't be defended against. A gravitational singularity powerful enough to tear apart. A moon would crush the Leviathan instantly, no matter how advanced its hull. On the Defiant, Captain Miller watched the massive energy beam streak toward the Leviathan. Ambassador Zixathelin was still on her screen, his expression a mixture of regret and resignation. I truly did not order this, Captain, he said quietly. But perhaps it is for the best. Your species has advanced too quickly. The Emperor would never allow such a potential threat to exist. Miller didn't respond. Her eyes were fixed on the Leviathan, waiting for the inevitable impact. But then something unexpected happened. Just before the beam struck, the Leviathan seemed to shimmer and partially fade from view. As the singularity weapon hit, instead of crushing the ship, the energy appeared to flow around and through it, as if the vessel existed partially in another dimension. What are they doing? Weaver demanded, leaning forward to study the sensor readings. That's not part of the absorption system. Martinez's eyes widened as she realized what was happening. They're using the dimensional shift drive defensively. Rivera is partially shifting the ship out of our reality at the moment of impact. Can it work? In theory, she said. But we never tested it that way. The power requirements would be enormous. On the Leviathan's bridge, alarms blared as systems overloaded and power fluctuated wildly. The ship shuddered violently and several consoles exploded in showers of sparks. Damage report, Rivera shouted over the noise. Wilson checked his readings, his face pale but determined. Hull integrity at 60% and holding. Dimensional. Shift system severely strained but functional. Power reserves down to 30%. Did it work? Rivera asked. Are we still here? Nicole Washington looked up from her weapons station with a smile of disbelief. It worked, Captain. We're damaged but intact. The singularity weapon's energy was partially diverted into the other dimension. A cheer went up from the crew, quickly, silenced as Rivera raised his hand. "We're not out of danger yet. Status of the Keltraxian flagship?" "Their weapon appears to have burned out after that single shot," Washington reported. "They're attempting to bring secondary weapons online." Rivera nodded. "Target their weapon systems and fire. One shot, maximum precision." Washington entered the commands. "Firing now." A single beam lanced out from the Leviathan, striking the Keltraxian flagship's weapons array with surgical precision. The alien vessel's weapon systems went dark immediately. On the Defiant, Miller watched in amazement as the Leviathan survived what should have been a devastating attack, then disabled the flagship's remaining weapons with a single shot. She turned back to the ambassador, whose blue face had gone pale with shock. "Ambassador," she said, her voice firm but controlled, "I believe we were discussing terms?" Zixisthelin stared at her for a long moment, then seemed to deflate slightly. "Yes," he said quietly. "It seems we were." 1 month later, Captain Miller stood in the United Nations Assembly Hall in New York, watching as representatives from 12 galactic civilizations gathered around a large table. The Earth had been busy in the weeks following the confrontation with the Keltraxian fleet. Word of the Leviathan and its capabilities had spread quickly through the nearby sectors of the galaxy, drawing the attention of species humanity had never encountered before. Admiral Weaver stood at the head of the table with Captain Rivera at his side. Across from them sat a tall, dignified Keltraxian, who bore a striking resemblance to Ambassador Zixisthelin, but with more elaborate clothing and a crown-like headpiece. "Prime Minister Zix Vortan," Weaver said, addressing the Keltraxian leader, "Earth is honored by your personal attendance at this historic gathering." The Prime Minister inclined his head slightly. "The honor is mutual, Admiral. Few species have ever earned the respect of the Empire so decisively." The document before them was titled the Sol Accords, a treaty recognizing Earth's sovereignty and establishing diplomatic relations with multiple galactic civilizations. It was a far cry from the subjugation the Keltraxians had originally planned. Reports of your Leviathan have spread throughout the galaxy," the Prime Minister continued. "Many believed it was propaganda until our fleet returned with visual evidence. How humans, isolated on one world for their entire history, developed such technologies in secret has caused considerable concern among the established powers." Weaver smiled diplomatically. "Perhaps that concern will encourage peaceful relations moving forward." The Prime Minister signed the document, followed by representatives from the other alien species and finally by Earth's Secretary General. As applause filled the hall, Miller caught Rivera's eye. They shared a brief smile of relief and pride. Later, in a private room away from the diplomats and press, Miller, Rivera, Weaver, and Martinez gathered to share a quiet moment of celebration. "Will they ever learn the truth?" Miller asked, the question that had been bothering her since the battle. Rivera exchanged glances with Weaver and Martinez. "What truth?" "That the Leviathan is mostly smoke and mirrors," Martinez said with a slight smile. "That we gambled everything on a warship that's 1/10 as powerful as they believe, but used psychological warfare and targeted strikes to create an illusion of invincibility. The dimensional shift drive is real enough," Rivera pointed out. "Without it, we would never have survived that singularity weapon." "Yes, but it nearly burned out after one use," Martinez replied. "In a prolonged conflict, we would have been destroyed. Or that humans' greatest strength has always been making our enemies believe we're more dangerous than we actually are," added Rivera. Weaver looked out the window at the New York skyline, where reconstruction from the brief Keltraxian bombardment of the city continued. "Let's hope we never have to find out. But in the meantime, Earth has a seat at the galactic table and breathing room to catch up to the technology they actually think we already have." Miller nodded, understanding the long game they had played. "So we won with a bluff." "No," said Weaver firmly. "We won because we understood something the Keltraxians didn't. Sometimes the most powerful weapon isn't the one that causes the most destruction. It's the one your enemy fears the most." As they looked out at the alien ships now peacefully orbiting Earth as diplomatic vessels, Miller felt both pride and concern. They had secured humanity's place in the galaxy through clever strategy and a single advanced ship. But the Leviathan was damaged, its most critical systems strained beyond safe limits. It would take months, perhaps years, to repair it fully. In the meantime, Earth would need to work frantically to develop real versions of the technologies they had only pretended to possess. The breathing room they had gained might not last forever. "We should get back to the ceremony," Weaver said after a moment. "The Prime Minister is expecting a tour of our fleet headquarters this afternoon." "You mean the holographic projection we set up at the lunar base?" Rivera asked with a smile. "The very same," Weaver confirmed. "Complete with digital models of 12 more Leviathan-class vessels under construction." As they walked back toward the assembly hall, Miller reflected on how quickly humanity had adapted to its new reality, from nearly becoming a conquered species to taking a place among the galactic powers, all because of one ship and a lot of clever deception. The universe, it seemed, still had much to learn about humans and their remarkable talent for turning weakness into strength. As other species would soon discover, underestimating humanity was a mistake no one made twice.